There'd be a lot of pardons and commutations of people that you think were treated unfairly, J6 defendants, January 6 defendants under an administration, your administration?
Yes. Absolutely.
Absolutely, Donald Trump says. Absolutely, he'll pardon those January 6 defendants. My name is Dina Sayegh Doll with the MeidasTouch Network. Let's break this down. Donald Trump has been talking quite a bit, not only about those January 6 defendants, but also about who he may possibly have as a vice president. And typical in Trump faction, it's all very outlandish. Now, in terms of the January 6 defendants, everything he says is just music to the ears of Jack Smith, because Jack Smith is taking down everything that Donald Trump says in public. And we know that he is going to be on trial in D.C. for his obstruction of the congressional hearing and for his lying about the election. That's really what the January 6th trial is about in D.C. And so all the comments he makes referring to January 6th, Jack Smith is taking a note of it. And in terms of the defendants, where Donald Trump says he plans on pardoning them, I mean, that's a very scary thing. Many people have had fair trials and have been convicted of their participation in the riot, in the obstruction, in the delay of the certification of the next president, one of the most basic democratic functions of Congress. But yet Donald Trump sticks by them. But, you know, I wonder how many more people will be willing to kind of go to that call of arms, because even though he says he's going to pardon them, when he was president, I mean, he was still president after January 6th happened, after the crimes of January 6th happened, and he didn't choose to pardon them then. He didn't even try to pardon them. You know, Donald Trump always acts like he's above the law. He could have tried to pardon them. Maybe somebody could have tried to argue that, sure, charges weren't brought yet. He didn't even try to pardon them, because the fact of the matter is, he isn't loyal to people that are loyal to him. And he did not pardon them, even though it was very clear that they were going to be facing charges, that they had committed a crime, if nothing else, a crime of trespassing. And these people, he's the one who brought them there. Months of talking, he brought them there. He didn't even try to pardon them. So he says he's going to pardon them. And I think if it's in his interest, he'll pardon them during a next term, if, forbid he has a next term. But the bottom line is he won't pardon them if it's not in his self-interest. Whether or not his loyalists will realize that he's not as loyal to them as they are to him, I hope for their own sake they do. But in terms of what Jack Smith is taking note of, you know, he says his footnote in the motion that Ben broke down recently in a video, talking about the fact that Donald Trump did not like the language that Jack Smith has in one of the several motions in the January 6th case in Washington, D.C., because it makes Donald Trump look bad, because the facts make Donald Trump look bad. And Jack Smith, in his argument for why that language should be allowed, I love the quote. It says, "Evidence is not unfairly prejudicial because it tends to prove guilt, but because it tends to encourage the jury to find guilt from improper reasoning." Basically saying, you can't say that this evidence is prejudicial and shouldn't be allowed in the motion just because it makes the person look guilty. It's only if it's kind of irrelevant to the case. Clearly, this is relevant. Clearly, Donald Trump doesn't like it because it makes him look guilty. But hey, evidence that makes you look guilty is still evidence. And then, he goes on to say the court should not strike language from the indictment simply because it's an accurate description of the defendant's crimes tends to show guilt. Basically, just because we're doing a good job at accurately describing the facts as they are, and yes, those facts make him look guilty, that's not a reason to strike the language from the motions. I just think that's a slam dunk. Let's tie that up with a bow. You don't like this language because it makes you look bad, but it's accurate and it's relevant. And at that point, if it makes you look guilty, it's kind of on you. But let's talk about in particular, the statements, because Donald Trump is a defendant in a criminal trial. A typical lawyer would say, do not talk about this case in public. Of course, anything you say is going to be used against you. But Donald Trump is also running for president, and he can't but not talk about himself. He can't not talk about himself being a victim. And so what does he do? But he, because he's on trial again regarding the January 6th insurrection, and he embraces the January 6th choir. And Jack Smith uses that in his motion in a footnote. And he says, quote, "The defendant began a campaign rally in Waco, Texas on March 25th, 2023 by playing a recording of the Star Spangled Banner by the January 6th choir." This is a special song. It's not like a typical national anthem. It says, "Of the January 6th choir, the defendant told the crowd, 'Our people love those people. They love those people.' The January 6th choir includes defendants who have assaulted law enforcement officers on January 6th and one who used chemical spray on a Capitol police officer who died the next day." I mean, this is who the January 6th choir includes. These are the facts that are out there that Jack Smith just has to kind of pluck out and include in his motion. And does it make Donald Trump look bad? Yes. But is it factual? Yes. Is it relevant? Certainly. And the fact that so many Republicans are willing to stand by Donald Trump, saying that they are supporting law enforcement. And here is a member of this choir who literally did spray this chemical spray into an officer who died the next day. And Donald Trump is saying how much he loves him. And the Republicans aren't just having this major outcry of this man's participation in a Capitol officer's death. Is that silence is echoes. And it shows that their statements about supporting law enforcement are truly hollow if it doesn't apply to everyone. So in addition to him kind of embracing this January 6th and talking, and Jack Smith just loving everything he says, Donald Trump is also talking about who his vice president candidate might be. And in the interview, they say, "What about Tucker Carlson?" And he says, "Oh, Tucker Carlson, he's a great guy. Like, I love this idea, maybe," kind of thing.
Would you consider Tucker, though, that based on the...
I like Tucker a lot. I guess I would. I think I'd say I would, because he's got great common sense.
Let's remind, we all know, we all remember, but let's just say this again. I mean, Tucker Carlson is the one who Fox had to fire when, they were faced with this huge defamation lawsuit, had to pay out huge amount of money. It came out about the harassment from his employees, Tucker Carlson, and the lies that he knowingly said these lies on broadcast, even though privately he knew that it was not true, that the election was stolen. And how in private he said I hate him passionately, referring to Trump. Evidently, Trump has maybe forgotten this, which is surprising. Trump tends to hold a grudge, but it's like two failed people are willing to work together, and Trump was willing to have that interview with Tucker Carlson instead of going on the debate stage. So, if Tucker Carlson ends up becoming the VP, I would think that's a classic example of the white man failing up, because after being kicked out of Fox, now having the second most powerful position in the country would be something only a white man can do. Let's be honest about that. But I think the person who's probably most upset about the idea of Tucker Carlson being VP is Vivek Ramaswamy, because he's certainly running for VP. He's trying to out-Trump Trump on all the debate stages. I don't know what is scarier, to be quite honest, somebody as incompetent as Tucker Carlson, who may privately actually have better views, or somebody like Vivek Ramaswamy, who wants to change the definition of the 14th Amendment, which would allow somebody to become a citizen who's born in this country. He says that if you're a child of an undocumented immigrant, you shouldn't be able to have citizenship in this country. Now, he seems to forget that his parents were not citizens at the time he was born, which would mean that under his theory, he wouldn't be a citizen, which means he wouldn't be qualified to become president. But you know what? He creates a loophole just for himself. He says, well, my parents actually started the application process, even though they hadn't finished the application process by the time I was born. The fact that they started it means that I should qualify under the 14th Amendment of being a natural born citizen, because even though they were not citizens, they had applied. This is the twists and turns and the nonsensical arguments that we are hearing from these MAGA Republicans and first the politicians who are trying to out-Trump Trump. My name is Dina Sayegh Doll with the MeidasTouch Network. Thanks for listening.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.